Hi everyone. Welcome to week 11 of our Comp 1 class. Sorry about any potential confusion with the Zoom meeting. I have a bad habit of forgetting to change the date of those invitations that I send out. So I'm just going to make a YouTube video that goes over what we're doing in our classes this week. This week, we're going to continue reflecting on the sources that you have been finding for writing Project 3. In particular, we're going to think about how those sources can help you explore your research question. As you work on your writing this week, don't forget that we have a couple different kinds of tutoring services available to you. So we have an in-person writing center. The info here is actually just a tiny bit outdated. I don't believe our writing center is operating online anymore. But if you ever do find yourself on campus, you can go to the writing center in person. However, even though we don't have an online writing center, you can actually use this button right here to go to NetTutor. So actually, let me take a moment to show you that. So I believe we can click this, writing in Paper Center. Yeah, and then you have a number of options. So this is actually through NetTutor. I do not believe this is directly through Columbus State, but still, so it's a really good service. So here you can meet live with a tutor, ask some questions, have them look at your paper, that kind of thing. Or you can drop off a paper and you'll then receive feedback in about a day, I think, typically. Or if you don't necessarily want to drop off the whole paper, but you just have a question or two, you can submit a question using this button. So we do have some different resources for you to get feedback on your paper. And of course, I am also happy to answer any questions that you might have. This week, make sure that you watch this video, that you look at all the modules that you're going to be doing before diving in. You have discussion board posts due Wednesday and Friday. And then at the end of the week, you're going to be submitting tasks 11.2, 11.3, and 11.4. Up first, we have task 11.1, which is synthesizing your sources. So hopefully by this point, you have found some sources that you think will be useful to you in writing Project 3. And what we're going to be doing is something called a synthesis here. As your textbook says, synthesizing sources means bringing together ideas and information from multiple sources in order to discover patterns and gain new insights and perspectives. So we have a chart attached here that you can download and type directly on. If for some reason you are not able to type into the chart that is available here, you can also recreate your own version of it. That would be easy enough to do. So let's take a look at this chart. So you'll see on the rows here, you have source 1, source 2, and so on. In this space, you should give the author name, the title of the source, or some other identifier so that you can remember what source that you were talking about. And then in your columns, you have these prompts here that tell you what you should be taking notes on. So for your first source, how does this source relate to your question, to your research question? Then, how info from this source relates to your own experiences or observation. You would type notes here in that box. Next, how this source has affected my own thinking about my question. You'd type those notes in this box. Then ways I might use this source in my writing project. And then finally, any other notes you might want to take about the source, you would type them here. Once you do that for source 1, you would move on and do the same thing for source 2 and source 3 and so on. Once you have filled in that chart, try to look for patterns. So are there certain ideas that seem to be repeating throughout your sources? Are there ideas that seem to overlap or connect to each other? Would you be able to use multiple sources to help make or explain or support a particular idea in your paper. So that's what task 11.1 is. It's getting you a little bit more familiar with your sources, digging into them, figuring out what your sources have in common with each other. Task 11.2 is developing a thesis statement for your draft. Remember that your textbook recommends that you begin by thinking of your overall topic as a question. We did that last week. Your next step is to think about how you will answer that question. And the answer is going to become the basis, the foundation for your thesis statement. So you've started, you have a question at this point, or at least you should. You've been gathering some info from your sources. Now you're going to try to answer your research question, and you're going to write out a few attempts. So basically for this project, your thesis statement is going to be an answer to your question. There's a couple of things for you to keep in mind as you do this activity. Remember that your answer to your thesis doesn't have to be definitive. It doesn't have to be set in stone. Writing Project 3 is an exploratory project, meaning that you don't necessarily have to have a very firm answer to your question. Your answer can be speculative. You can potentially have multiple answers to your question. That is fine. There may not be a clear answer to your question, and that's fine. Also remember, and we talked about this in Writing Project 2, qualifying your thesis, qualifying your claims can be helpful. We have a video about that in task 8.2. So we qualify things because it's rare that when we make a claim, when we make an argument, that argument is going to be 100% correct in every single circumstance. That's just not usually how arguments work. There's always going to be some exception. There's always going to be some situation in which that argument is not true. So knowing how to qualify your thesis can lend you a little bit more credibility as a writer. I'd also like you to keep in mind that your thesis will most likely evolve as you think about your rhetorical situation. So who is your audience going to be? What is your purpose for this assignment? What do you want to try and accomplish? Are you arguing something? Are you just informing your audience? What might your audience know or not know already? What genre are you going to be aiming for? Do you want your paper to feel very exploratory, or do you want it to feel a little bit more definitive, a little bit more argumentative? Those sorts of things will potentially impact how your thesis statement is worded. Task 11.3 is making your Wednesday discussion board post. In this post, you should share 3 things. First of all, your research question, then your working/tentative thesis statement, and then any concerns or questions you have about your thesis statement. For task 11.4, you're going to create an outline or some other plan for your draft. There are multiple ways that you can go about organizing this project, and that's going to depend on your rhetorical situation. So consider your purpose, your audience, and your context. In other words, what's your main goal in your writing? What do you want readers to feel, think, or do? Who is your audience? How familiar will they be with your topic, with your research, with your sources? How much detail are you going to need to provide? You're going to need to provide lots of background information, or maybe not much at all. How do you plan to guide your readers through your writing? Those are all things to consider when thinking about how you want to structure your paper. One of your first options is an argument pattern. So you might feel like you've discovered or developed a pretty strong, pretty reliable answer to your research question. And so your main purpose might be to persuade your readers that your answer is viable. If that's the case, then an argument-based structure might be the way that you want to go. For some examples of this, you can take a look at page 179 in your textbook. Using these examples might You might state your thesis in the intro. You would probably explain your personal connection to the research questions fairly early in your paper as well. Then you would organize your body around the reasons that you are presenting. Your support for your reasons would come from your sources as well as your own experiences. And you can consult the chapter on arguing a position in your field guide for further information that will help you if you decide to go with this pattern. And this says writing project 4 here. I'll go in and change this when the video is done. This should just say writing project 3. Next, you might do a report pattern. So if you don't really want to focus on arguing, maybe you want to focus on informing your readers, then a report-based pattern is probably going to be best for you. I would take a look at pages 151 through 152. You're still probably going to state your thesis in the intro. You'll also probably explain your connection to the paper or to the topic fairly early in the paper. Then you would organize your body paragraphs around subtopics related to your question and answer, again with your support coming from your sources and your own reflections and experiences. An argument pattern and a report pattern are fairly similar. The main difference is that an argument pattern is going to focus on points. It's going to focus on arguments. It's going to focus on proving things. Whereas a report pattern is going to focus more on ideas, more on topics. So in the report pattern, you're not really arguing anything. You're not really convincing anybody of anything. You're more so just presenting information in a structured way. Next, we have a proposal pattern. If your goal is to suggest something, to call for some kind of action, to propose something to your reader, then this is the pattern that you would want to use. I would take a look at pages 252 and 253. If you use these examples, if you follow this pattern, you might begin by explaining the problem you wish to solve or the new way you want to consider your research question. Then you might propose your solution or new way of thinking, which would be your thesis. Then you would present reasons to support your proposal. We have an exploration pattern. If your primary intention is to prompt your readers to reflect on your question, or if you want to emphasize your own personal reactions and reflections, or if you kind of want to take your readers on a journey of how you came to a particular conclusion, or just how your thinking has changed, then a reflective structure, an exploration pattern might be best for you. So such an organizational pattern is going to tell a story of your thinking and your exploring process. Your paper would probably begin by describing the question and why you're interested in it. Then it would narrate your process of contemplating the question and searching for your answer with the help of your sources and your experiences and observations. Your thesis, which is the answer to your question, could actually appear at the end of your paper rather than the beginning. If you decide to go this route, you should take a look at the chapter on explorations in your textbook. You can also take a look at the sample paper in the Student Success Gallery from Brian. That's a good example of an exploration pattern. You could do an IMRAD pattern. If your main intention is to educate your readers or present a detailed account of your research method, especially if you did something like conduct interviews or make a survey or something, then the IMRAD structure might be what you are looking for. This pattern is often used in sciences and social sciences, and it employs specific headings to help readers make sense of your research process. What IMRAD stands for is Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. The structure might be especially useful to you. Like I said, if you did field research, if you did surveys, if you conducted interviews, if you did more formal observations of something. Under the heading Introduction, you might explain your research question and why you care about it. Methods, you might describe how you went about collecting information from interviews, questionnaires, etc. Under Results, you might explain what you found out. And then under Discussion, you might explain what your findings mean to you personally what your answer or thesis is. And then lastly, a mixed genre pattern. You might combine different aspects of the different patterns that I have just gone over. Once you have considered these different organizational patterns and looked at some examples, you should decide which one you want to use, and then create an outline or some other plan for your project. Whatever you end up deciding to do, make sure it is clear what kind of organizational pattern that you are using. Try to be specific, give details about what you'll focus on, and say in each paragraph or each major portion of your paper. If you don't want to do a more traditional outline, you could also consider using a visual method, and I have an example of that here. Task 11.5 is making your Friday discussion board post. In this post, I would like you to tell us what you are planning to do for your organizational pattern, and why do you plan on following that pattern. I'd also like you to find a chapter in the field guide that you think will help you most when it comes to writing Project 3. Tell your classmates which chapter you chose and one key thing that you learned from it. And finally, remember to comment on at least 2 of your peers' posts for the week. Do you have any suggestions for their thesis statements? Do you have any ideas from chapters that might be helpful to them, or just general feedback that you'd like to provide? By Sunday, you should submit all the writing that you did for tasks 11.1, 11.2, and 11.4. Those are the source synthesis chart, your tentative thesis statement, and your organizational plan. Now let's take a look at what we are doing for fundamentals of college writing. This week, we're going to be doing the 3rd reflections assignment workshop. If you need to, familiarize yourself with the guidelines for that. Although I'm guessing by this point in the semester, you're pretty familiar with what the final reflections assignment is. Before diving into the workshop, I have a reading that I would like you to do. This is, you're going to be reading a portion of an essay called How to Read Like a Writer by a guy named Mike Bunn. You can access the text by clicking here. I have it pulled up right here for you. And I'd like you to read from page 71 until the end of page 74. And this reading should help you better understand the work that you're going to be doing in this 3rd reflections workshop. Task 11.3, we have the instructions for the workshop. Again, you should have been doing all of these workshops on the same document. If for some reason you haven't been, please make sure to download this template here and to make sure that your writing for workshops 1 and 2 are on this document. We want all of your workshops to be on the same document that you will be submitting at the end of the semester. This workshop just has 2 steps. There's a section of the template that says type out new paragraph here. What you're going to do is, so in a previous workshop, you should have copied and pasted an original paragraph from either Writing Project 1 or Writing Project 2. And then you are going to revise or rewrite that paragraph using different nouns, verbs, and adjectives wherever possible, while largely keeping the same substance or content of the paragraph. Some of your words can stay the same, but I do want to be looking, I want to be seeing more substantial changes to your writing. And I have a very short example here of what this might look like. So your original paragraph might have said the red car drove down the highway, and then your new paragraph, your revised paragraph might say the red convertible shrieked down the highway. So instead of red car, we've changed it to convertible. Instead of just saying it drove, we're saying it shrieked. And that changes the tone, the message a little bit of that sentence. And you're going to be reflecting on that. So step 2 here, in the section that says write reflection paragraph about differences, I want you to write about the changes you made to your original paragraph. As Mike Bunn tells us, writing is a word-by-word, sentence-by-sentence process. All writing consists of a series of choices. So I want you to reflect on the word choices, grammar choices, and tonal choices that you made while writing the original paragraph. And what does the experience of writing the new version allow you to understand about the rhetorical choices? So your purpose, your audience, your genre. Does composing a new version reveal any room for improvement in your writing that you would like to address going forward in your life as a writer? You do not have to write about every single change that you made. I just want you to isolate and describe the most significant changes and make sure that your paragraph is 200 words. Here's an example of what that reflection might look like. So, as I wrote the new version, I realized that the original used neutral language. I wanted to add sensory imagery and use the description of the car to reflect the personality of my character. Naming the car type convertible adds specificity and suggests that the driver is fashionable and rich. Driving is a neutral verb, but shrieking indicates a high speed and an accompanying noise, as if the reader can hear the car in motion. This verb communicates the reckless attitude that the rest of my vignette associates with the character as well. Every car drives. There are many red cars. The changes I made single out the car's uniqueness to the story. When you are done with that, you will submit the third workshop here by 11:59 on Thursday. Here's just a recap of everything that your document should have. So most of this you did in the first two workshops. If you have not done these things, make sure that you have by the time you submit your third workshop. And then you're also going to post to the discussion board. So in that Mike Bunn essay, he quotes Alan Tate's comments on the historian and architect, who represent two different ways of reading. I have the quote here for you. You can read that. In your post, I'd like you to discuss why you think Mike Bunn included this passage within his essay. Put the distinction between the historian and the architect into your own words. So what is the difference between those two different types of reader? How are the differences between these two professions related to reading? That is all for this week. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to let me know. I'll be happy to help you out.